What is humanity if not about helping others and looking out for each other? Literature helps in understanding human nature and conditions which affect all people. Literature gives voice to those who want to express their opinion, thereby strengthening the foundation of humanity. This is African Literature on the largest television network in Africa, the NTA. I am Nena Basi and you're welcome. Our focus on this episode is on understanding some human conditions and accepting one another in the society.
The primary use of literature in ancient settings was to pass down customs, traditions, beliefs, and feelings to the younger generations. In recent centuries, literature has taken on a more comprehensive role of mirroring society in order for humans to study themselves and understand the underlying truths common to all people. Literature has become a critical component in education as it teaches humans to see themselves reflected in art. This allows people to learn about life from the perspectives of others, helping them to be more understanding and respectful of those around them. ANYALI, another of Emeka Aniagolu's social cultural work, takes us into the myth and prejudice of albinism. The novel is an outcry and an invitation into the plight of albinos.
The whole thing about albinos or albinos, albinism, was something that intrigued me as an idea. I knew, of course, growing up here in Nigeria, that they were discriminated against in a number of ways, even if not killed outright and so on. And I was always intrigued by it and wanted to find out more about albinism. But even more importantly, I wanted to find out how people who had the condition made their way in the course of their lives in a homogeneous society where most people looked normal, color, black, and so forth, and the kind of sociological consequences that was for them in terms of human interaction, going through school, getting jobs, finding mates, and so on and so forth. So I had always wanted, and I kept thinking, all right, this is something that is occurring and occurs in Africa. It occurs in many other parts of the world, but primarily in Africa, that somebody sometime would write something about it. Of course, there are lots of books that are like more or less medical texts and so on about albinism, but that doesn't tell the story of the experience of an albino going through life. So when I discovered that there really wasn't a novel or anything of the sort that told the story from the point of view of an albino, I thought to myself, yes, this is something I want to do, certainly in line with some of the other things you mentioned that I had written about in the past.
Storytelling for Emeka is an acceptable mode of education to the larger society.
Well, I've always believed that human beings are particularly storytelling animals. And we love stories, and we make up stories, and we examine stories. And I'm both a political scientist and a historian. I think a historian is a storyteller to a large extent, even though we like to think in a professional historian's point of view that you tell a story with particular types of protocols and methods and so forth and so on. But I've also discovered that people prefer stories than texts. I mean, I could have written the book as a text that theoretically could be used in a classroom. I mean, you can still use the literature work in a classroom, but people love to be entertained with a good story, as well as be educated in the course of it. And I thought to myself, writing a novel with an albino or albino main character, and then surrounding the person's life in the course of the narrative with the different experiences they go through would be ideal.
ANYALI is weaved around the female character Onyinye as the author finds women more versatile as protagonists.
I use a female character by the name Onyinye because I find female characters a bit more versatile than male characters. And quite a number of my novels have been based on female characters. She obviously was born into a bit more of a privileged condition where her parents were able to look after her and learned about albinism and took care of it, although they were not expecting to have an albino child and so forth. But they rose to the occasion and did what they had to do. But that was so much of what they could do for her, trying to raise her. Then she had to go into the world. And then in getting into the world, she starts encountering issues about dating and intimacy and studying and so on and so forth. And I try as much as possible to show how navigating her way through all that with the condition of albinism was a problem, but how she was able to triumph over it, because there was a need to also provide some hope that somebody can indeed, and many have, triumph over the problem.
He unveils some intrigues about albinos.
Absolutely, there are lots of those superstitions, and they wouldn't be true if they were superstitions, would they? And stereotypes about albinos that come out of what I call a pre-scientific age. And to be fair to the people, they really didn't understand the science behind it. It's sort of like 15th, 16th, 18th century European racism, where a lot of it was not supported by actual evidence. It is true some of the prejudice have survived the scientific evidence and linger even as we speak today. But at least there's now a body of empirical evidence, scientific evidence, that you can go to determine whether there's any essential racial difference between a black person and a white person and a Chinese and so on and so forth. Similarly, in the pre-scientific world, the people had no way of explaining, just like we discussed that of the case of Ejima, how this could happen. Two black people, and we're talking about sometimes pitch black, producing somebody with no color at all. This must have totally befuddled the people, and did. And they saw them as freaks and strange characters and demons in some instances. And as what happens with those kind of things, some of them were sold off into slavery. Some of them were sent then into Igbo land in what they used to call the evil forest, Ajofia. Many were sacrificed at the altar of the gods. Many were yoked to those shrines as perpetual slaves, just like the Osu and so on and so forth. And many of the parents at the time were so shocked that they produced this strange creature that they eagerly gave up those children for sacrifice and so on. But of course, that changed over time, and none of that happens today, even though most people probably still wouldn't want to marry one or be intimate with them and so forth and so on. So there's been quite a bit of change coming out of that period. Clearly, in the scientific world, we know exactly what albinism is, what causes it, there's an inherited condition, and that the people who produce albinos carry the recessive genes for it, even if it doesn't manifest in themselves, and so on and so forth. All of that I weave into the book, the objective being to both entertain and educate.
The text is a call to parents, the government, and general public on the way forward for this set of people.
I mean, the advice I'll give if you're a parent is to join an organization, NGO or something, particularly the Albino Foundation, that has gone out of their way to try to create both advocacy systems, educational systems, that will help parents, particularly if the parents are not themselves particularly well educated, about some of the things that can be used to mitigate the conditions, the creams that are needed, the eye testing, and so on and so forth. Those organizations will be able to help. My suggestion, of course, for the government is to do everything they can to help to support those organizations, as well as to provide through the regular government healthcare services outreach programs in cities and towns and villages to find those kind of people and inform them about what to do and where to find help, and if need be help, particularly with things like providing the right kind of glasses, eyewear, and so forth for their sight. And otherwise, most of them are fairly okay people. And many of the ones I've met are highly intelligent and can function quite well in society.
Africa has the largest number of albinos, he observes.
All over the continent, particularly south of the Sahara. Because the fact of the matter is that Africans have the largest variation in gene pool of any people in the world, considering that the Homo sapiens, you and I and everybody else around, originated from here, from this continent, and then migrated into other parts of the world. And a lot of evolutionary changes would occur in the course of that migration to adapt to the different climates that brought about some of the variations we call races today. But at base, we're from the same genetic root. And because of that, you don't have as many albinos among the other groups of Africans spread around the world, Europeans and Asians so-called now, as used to be, or as many in Africa, the Aboriginal population. Yeah? But they occur. There are albinos among white people. There are albinos among Indians, albinos among Chinese, and so on and so forth. But because most of them are relatively lighter skinned, the contrast will not be as radical. Yeah? Sometimes you might actually see a European where you may not know as an African that they are an albino. But they may have particularly blonde hair and this and that and the other and so forth. Because of that radical contrast, in the context of a homogeneous black society, whether it's Nigeria, Tanzania, Ghana, wherever, there is going to be some way, especially in the context of a pre-scientific world, a way of trying to make sense of that radical difference.
The need to give explanation to some of our socio-cultural phenomenon informs his type of writing.
I believe that there's a lot of information and stories that have not been told coming from the culture that I do, that need modern reinterpretation so that the younger people today can get a sense of where things came from, who they are, what it's supposed to mean, what it meant, and so on and so forth. If you want to call that faction, which some people call a combination of facts and fiction, you want to call it a kind of interpretive literature, where I'm trying to somehow interpret the past, the history, and make sense of it in the modern world for contemporaries. That's the kind of literature I'm interested in. And it helps me to open up what seem like mysteries. Like a lot of people have not seen any novel or read any novel that ever dealt specifically with albinos. So this would be the first they'll be seeing. I'm like, but albinos, like you said, are human beings. And other than that condition, they share everything else with everybody else. And they have feelings, they have thoughts, hopes, fears, and so on and so forth. They love, they want to be loved, and so on. So instead of abstracting it, I want to put it right in the center of the human condition.
ANYALI, as the title of the novel goes further to help in promoting indigenous culture and language.
Well, the Igbo word for albino is ANYALI. That's what it is, just like the Yorubas call them Afin, and I happen to be Igbo. So I decided to use the Igbo name for them to just like I said, Ejima in my book, novel Ejima. And I happen to believe that if you're somebody who likes novels, or you like to read stories, when you see something that intrigues you, you're not sure of, you should be motivated to find out. So if you see the book somewhere and you're wondering what on earth is ANYALI, pick it up, take a look at it, read the back, and then you will discover it. And that's how people learn. There are lots of things we didn't know before, and until we go and learn about it, then we learn and discover new things. I always believe it is important for cultures to put forth their best foot so that people who didn't know about something before will learn something about it. If yesterday you didn't know anything about the word ANYALI, after watching your program and listening to this, you'll know, okay, that's what the Igbos call albinos. And that would be something new under your belt, and we'll get on with life.
His language and style of writing is explicit.
What might appear simple may appear difficult for someone else. But again, I always look at these things as a journey of knowledge and discovery. So if you see a word you're unused to, if you're somebody really interested in learning, look it up. And it won't be a big word anymore for you once you look it up. But does it flow in terms of the story line and the narrative that the average person will be drawn into the story? Yes. That's what I've been told.
He expresses his optimism on albinos and albinism.
That the people are perfectly normal people other than the condition of albinism. That it is not of their own making. They were simply born that way and is an inherited condition. So visiting this kind of animus towards them as if they did something wrong or it's their fault is completely wrong. And that there are a lot of ways by which the extreme conditions or manifestations of that condition can be indeed contained by using the right kind of protective cream to protect them from the ultraviolet rays of the sun, wearing corrective lenses, and so on and so forth.
Emeka Aniagolu has proven to be a very thorough and genuine writer who has the interest in offering solutions to societal issues. Let's get to know him more.
ANYALI, meaning albino in Igbo language, is the title of another of Emeka Aniagolu's social, cultural, literary piece. The novel chronicles the story of an exceptionally beautiful lady, Onyinye, who is discriminated against for being a person living with albinism. Onyinye, the lead character in the text, determines to surmount the obstacles in her life due to no fault of hers and aims to the peak of her career. She eventually finds love when she least expected it in her life. Emeka Aniagolu, a native of Amankwo Eke in Enugu State, Nigeria, is a professor of political science with a focus on international political economy, African history, and African American studies. He has taught as a professor in several institutions abroad, like Black World Studies of Ohio Wesleyan University, Delaware, Ohio. He taught at the Department of African American and African Studies at Ohio State University for 32 years, and also as an adjunct professor in international studies at the Ohio State University, Columbus, Ohio for many years. Emeka Aniagolu is the author of more than 18 works of fiction and non-fiction. His novel, ANYALI, is his 10th book of fiction. Emeka Aniagolu, being aware of numerous social cultural challenges facing the continent of Africa, which include poverty, poor education, ill health, violence, hunger, and more, chooses to use the tool of literature as a means of proffering help to the society. In Africa today, numerous challenges continually confront millions of people living with albinism, first as individuals and as a demographic group within the continent. Albinism causes social problems in Nigeria as well as many other countries in Africa because people with this condition look different from their families, peers, and other members of their ethnic group. People with albinism are at risk of isolation because the condition is often misunderstood. To help these group of people attain social acceptance, protection, and a ripe old age, Emeka offered a great insight through his novel, ANYALI.
Looking out for a way to navigate requests, conversation, and criticism without sounding offensive or harsh. Well, our next literary instrument may help.
Literatures is a common literary device that appears everywhere from daily conversation to pop cultures and even political context. The word literatures can be defined as a device most often used in speech, featuring a phrase that utilizes negative wordings or terms to express a positive statement. Literatures originated from Cicero in 56 BC. Cicero uses the word to mean simplicity of life. In Greek origin, literatures means simple and is derived from the word litus, meaning plain, small, or meager. Literatures has been in existence in the year 1589. In rhetoric, literatures is also known as antenantiosus or moderator. It is a part of figure of speech and a special form of verbal irony in which understatement, more specifically meiosis, is always deliberate with the intention of emphasis. The use of literatures is common in English, Russian, German, Yiddish, Dutch, Hebrew, Aramaic, Greek, and other African countries. It is also predominated in a number of other language and dialects. Literatures is a feature of Old English poetry and of the Icelandic sagas, and means of much stoical restraint. Examples of literatures: he isn't the brightest bulb in the box. He's somewhat dumb. Graduating from college was no mean feat. Graduating from college was a major achievement. It's not rocket science. It's about as simple as it gets. He's no spring chicken. He's getting older. Parties just aren't my cup of tea. I hate parties. Types of literatures. There are 3 types of literatures in literature: contradictory literatures, contrary literatures, and relative literatures. Importance of literatures. Literatures is a literary tool used frequently in comic or snarky statements. It gives a cutting edge to those who want to use it to win laughs or insult someone. It's often used as a milder, gentler way of navigating request, criticism, and conversation, thereby softening the harsh sound of criticism. Writers use literatures to invoke the absence of a thing or quality, and sometimes employ it for a biting, ironic touch.
If we are to live together in peace, we must make efforts to know ourselves better. Up next is our wise saying. While reflecting on these words, please stay safe. Bye.
Umesa